You know, our entire legal system was built for a physical world. We're talking about courtrooms you can walk into and contracts made of paper. So what happens when so much of our life moves online? How does the law keep up? That's exactly what we're going to explore, the concept of virtual legal reality. This video summary is based on the works of Professor Vihar Kiskunov.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to trace the idea of virtuality way back. You might be surprised where it started. Then, we'll jump into how it's already being used in the legal world today. After that, we'll get to the heart of it and define what virtual legal reality actually is. And to wrap things up, we'll look at the principles we'll need to navigate this new digital frontier.
All right, let's start at the beginning with a concept and its origins. You see, to really get a grip on where law is heading in this digital age, we first have to understand where this whole idea of a virtual world even came from in the first place.
Okay, so what are we even talking about when we say virtual reality? The simplest way to think about it is this: it's a non-physical reality. It's a world that's created and kept alive by the internet and information tech. That's it. It's a simple idea, but it's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover.
Now, you might think this is all about computers and the internet, but the idea of a non-physical reality, it's way, way older. We're talking about ancient philosophers like Plato and his whole concept of a perfect world of ideas. Fast forward through the centuries, and you have thinkers constantly wrestling with the difference between what's really real and our own experience of it. So the internet didn't invent this concept. It just gave a very old idea a brand new, incredibly powerful home.
Okay, so we've got the basic definition down. But now we need to dig into what makes this virtual world so unique. What are its core properties? Because those properties are exactly what raises all these new, tricky questions for our legal system.
This virtual world has some really interesting characteristics. For one, it's an ideal phenomenon, which is a way of saying it's a product of our minds, of human thought, which, when you think about it, is a lot like the law itself. But it's also manageable, it's automated, and, this is a big one, it's recoverable. You can literally undo things. Now, these features give it amazing power, but you can probably see how they also create some massive challenges for the law.
And that really leads us to the central puzzle, doesn't it? How does a legal system designed for a physical world even begin to deal with a reality that's non-physical, automated, and where you can just hit undo? This is where all that theory starts to have very real-world consequences.
So you might be wondering, how is the law actually using this new reality? And I want to be clear, this isn't some far-off science fiction stuff. These virtual tools are already woven into our legal system as we speak.
Honestly, once you start looking, you see its functions everywhere. Think about digital IDs for authentication, or how we exchange legal decisions, what lawyers call statements of will, through digital means. It's also what lets us create electronic forms for everything from contracts to official applications. And maybe most importantly, it's the foundation for these massive electronic registries that are basically becoming our new public records.
But it's really important to get this. The law's relationship with virtual reality isn't an all-or-nothing deal. It's more like a spectrum. On one end, you have simple tools, and on the other, you have these deeply integrated, comprehensive systems. So let's look at the two ends of that spectrum. On one side, you have minimal participation. This is where virtual reality is basically just a new tool for communication. A perfect example is using email to send a signed contract. But on the other extreme, you have maximum participation. Here, the virtual system is doing almost all the heavy lifting. I'm talking about everything from creating legal agreements to actually enforcing them. Humans are still in the loop, but their role becomes more about setting the initial rules and then evaluating the outcome.
Let's make this more concrete. Take something like the formation of will. That's just a legal term for making a decision. Traditionally, that's 100% human, but in a maximum virtual system, the software itself could generate that decision based on rules we give it. Or how about storage? We went from paper files in cabinets to digital files on a server. Now we're looking at things like blockchains, where the evidence, the record, is literally part of the system's code.
Let's walk through a super common example of that minimal participation. It's something you've probably done. First, you make a decision. Then, you use technology, like a word processor, to create an electronic document. You authenticate it with an electronic signature, send it off via email, and then store it somewhere safe online. See? The core decision was all you, but every single step to make it legally binding happened in the virtual world.
All right, so we've seen the history, the properties, and some real-world examples. Now we can finally tackle the big question. What is virtual legal reality?
But before I give you the modern definition, listen to this.
All the way back in 1857, a legal philosopher named Rudolf von Jhering said something amazing. He said the law creates a world from purely spiritual material, and that this abstract world is the true homeland of the lawyer. Think about that. He's saying the law has always lived in a kind of abstract, non-physical space. All technology is doing now is building a virtual home that perfectly fits the law's true nature.
So, when we look at it from a legal viewpoint, virtual legal reality is really the blueprint for the whole system. It's the collection of all the legal ideas, the rules, the structures, things like normative constructions and electronic registers. It's the design for how law is supposed to function in this virtual environment.
And if the legal view is the blueprint, then the technological view is the actual building. It's the interconnected systems, the databases, the identification tech, all the digital infrastructure that's built using that legal blueprint to give our actions online real legal meaning. One is the plan, the other is what makes the plan work.
Okay, so if we're actually building this new legal world, we have to ask, what are the foundational principles? What are the rules that should govern this emerging rule of code?
And these principles here, they aren't just nice ideas or suggestions. They are absolute non-negotiable requirements. A virtual legal system is only legitimate if it's built on a solid foundation of things like the rule of law, data protection, universal access, and transparency. If you take those away, the whole thing falls apart.
But this leads to a huge challenge, something we could call the paradox of transparency. The more we embed legal processes into complex code to make them efficient, the higher the risk that they become a black box, something that's impossible for a normal person or even many experts to understand. So the very technology that's supposed to help could actually make things less transparent and less just. That's why we'll need brand new tools like algorithmic auditing to be able to look inside that box and see how decisions are being made.
And that leaves us with one final, crucial question to think about. We're moving from a world where virtual reality is just a tool we use, to one where it can generate legal facts on its own through things like smart contracts. So the question is this: how do we ensure that the timeless, fundamental rule of law always governs the powerful new rule of code? That, right there, is the central challenge for the future of justice.